representative of so many people in the Labour movement. And I couldn't at first understand why you were being targeted and smeared. And of course, it did occur to me that the reason for that was because that you were speaking out in a way that the mainstream media and the elite behind the mainstream media didn't enjoy, and indeed the government. And we know now that those same targets and smears were used to take out Jackie Walker, Mark Wadsworth, Ken Livingstone, and then eventually Jeremy Corbyn. So it wasn't just you, but you know, how long you'd spent your entire life in the Labour movement, hadn't you?
Yeah, I mean, I joined the Labour Party when I was 19 in 1976 and really dedicated my life to being an activist. I didn't ever expect to become an MP when I first joined the Labour Party. In fact, it was a bloke called Philip Whitehead, who was the MP for Derby North, who recruited me into the Labour Party, actually, because I tried to join on 3 separate occasions, but my application just seemed to disappear into a black hole. And in desperation, I contacted Philip Whitehead. I knew that Philip was an animal rights advocate, as it were, a parliamentarian in support of the anti-blood sports campaign, and I was very active in that. And so knew him through those activities, and wrote to him and said that I wasn't able to join the Labour Party. I'd been trying on several occasions, and he sorted it out for me. So essentially, he kind of recruited me into the party. And you know, he was somebody who was you know, somebody who I thought kind of fitted the description of being an MP. His background, you know, he was a local guy, to be fair, from Derbyshire, but you know, he was a very erudite guy, very kind of well-educated individual, a TV producer and writer and all those sorts of things. And you know, I was an apprentice bricklayer. The last thing I ever thought I would end up being was being well, even a councillor, never mind a member of Parliament. But you know, I was content with throwing myself into the front line of activism, really. And you know, I felt that it was important that we got activists on the ground. I always thought that the Labour Party was the best vehicle to deliver progressive social change. I guess I looked at the Labour Party through rose tinted spectacles. My mum and dad were Labour supporters. My mum and dad were of the Second World War generation, and you know, they talked fondly about a Labour government coming to power in 1945 and introducing the National Health Service and building loads of houses and introducing the welfare state and ensuring full employment, etc. And of course, I was a beneficiary of that. I mean, the post-war consensus that Labour government heralded in ensured that there was a narrowing of inequality in the country. So, you know, I in the mid-1970s was you know, young apprentice bricklayer, able to buy my own house and stuff like that, and thought things were just going to carry on, really. But as I say, I just felt that the Labour Party was that vehicle, and I now realise that in reality it's always been a tool of the establishment, and even in that 1945 Labour government didn't really do as much as it could have done. And although it's set in train that post-war consensus, there were many areas of domestic policy as well as certainly foreign policy where they fell well short. And obviously, when Dennis Healey went to the International Monetary Fund in 1976 and heralded in the kind of monetarist neoliberal era that we're still living with today, we saw that then being turbocharged by Thatcher and carried on by Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, who actually continued the deregulation, in fact, went further with the deregulation agenda. But even in those dark days of New Labour, you know, Lizzie, I kind of remained loyal to the Labour Party. I always felt that the Labour Party, even then, was still the best vehicle we got. I was maybe content with crumbs from the table, but always had this naive hope that one day, if we could get sufficient numbers of members of the Labour Party, we might be able to change it. And if one day we could maybe elect somebody like Tony Benn. I was very active in Tony Benn's deputy leadership campaign in 1981, and you know, we didn't quite get over the line. Actually, had the electoral college applied the same proportions as applied when Tony Blair was elected, then Tony Benn would have been elected as deputy leader. The course of history would have been very different. But I, as I say, stuck to this notion that one day, you know, if only we could just get enough members. And I was forever, you know, urging people, even in the dark days of New Labour, to say, well, look, we'll join the Labour Party, help us make it better. And then when I lost my seat in 2015 and Then Jeremy managed to get onto the ballot paper, and we got involved in that campaign, and it gathered momentum. And obviously, Jeremy then got elected by a landslide, and then this mass membership developed. We got left-wing leader, protege of Tony Benn. And I thought, blimey, you know, we're there. We're gonna really do something really credible now. And unfortunately, it all fell apart. I mean, we had a great opportunity after 2017. That was probably, you know, Lizzie, the best result that we could have hoped for, because had we won a majority in that election, we wouldn't have been able to deliver that manifesto, because the Parliamentary Labour Party would have sabotaged it. But in 2017, we came close, as you'll recall, and we then embarked on this democracy review, and I went on a tour of the country and added to its terms of reference by saying we've got to make MPs accountable to the members. We've got to put the members in the driving seat to determine policy, to determine who the candidates are at elections and so on. And if we can achieve that, then we've got a fighting chance, if we can get into government, of being able to implement our programme. But that would have been only the start, Lizzie, of the struggle. We wouldn't have, at least we would have been able to neutralise the enemy within, if you like, the Parliamentary Labour Party, the right wing particularly of the Parliamentary Labour Party, would have been neutralised by that democratisation agenda. But of course, the establishment were all geared up to ensure that we couldn't, you know,
Well,
make much progress.
they did get a big shock, didn't they? You know, we scared the living daylights out of them. And I think that, you know, they had got complacent, thinking that it was just going to be situation normal forever, and that the people would never educate themselves enough or critically think enough to be able to rise up. And all of a sudden, there's this absolute hippie from the back seats just stood up and said, I'll do it. And everybody followed him. And that's where I came into the Labour movement. Before that, I had never voted. I knew that the government and all of its machinations were totally corrupt. And I knew this, but when I saw Jeremy Corbyn become leader, Ed Miliband tried his best, but you know, as you detail in your book, he failed. But he was taken out with a bacon sandwich. So
I mean, Ed was no Jeremy Corbyn, and I remember saying to Ed Miliband, and I've covered this in the book actually, that, you know, if stick to your instincts, Ed, and if I think if he'd have done that, then he would have achieved a lot more. But he was undone by the Parliamentary Labour Party as well. I mean, obviously that bacon sandwich didn't help, but you know, the Parliamentary Labour Party were pretty objectionable towards him.
Well, the bacon sandwich was probably leaked, you know, that he'd be there eating a bacon sandwich at that particular time, wasn't it?
What on earth he was doing, posing for a photograph like that, I don't know. But anyway, he did. But I mean, his policy agenda was essentially continuity New Labour, even though he talked about turning the page on New Labour. And again, you know, I talk about this in the book and talk about, you know, issues in relation to the welfare reform bill and some of the battles that we had in the Parliamentary Labour Party at the time in relation to that, and retrospective legislation that was going to, you know, basically impoverish still further unemployed workers, etc. And you know, if Ed had followed through on that commitment that he gave in the leadership election campaign of 2010 to turn the page on New Labour, and indeed one of the things Ed said was that if we'd listened to our members a bit more when we were in government, we wouldn't have made as many mistakes. And then, oh, great soundbite, but then he continued to not listen to the members, as it were, and so the offer was pretty pathetic. It was kind of austerity light. And that's what I mean, I remember going around knocking on the doors. I mean, again, I cover this in the book, in the 2015 election. And people were saying, well, you're all the same. There's no bloody difference, you know. And I mean, the truth was, there wasn't really very much difference between us. And I mean, and a lot of that was really Ed Balls' fault. You know, he was very arrogant and committed, a committed neoliberal at the end of the day.
Did you feel that, I know you said you suffered from imposter syndrome. Did you feel with Ed, both Miliband and Balls, that you were looking up at the elite or the establishment and that you weren't a part of it? You were just looking up at it.
Yes, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I never really took to that place. I mean, it's interesting because some of the, I mean, and again, there's a, I'll give a few little anecdotes about some of the work, not that there are very many working class Labour MPs in the House anymore, but I give one or two little examples of how they've essentially just gone native, really. They've really steeped themselves in the bullshit procedures and protocols of the House of Commons, and I never ever did. I always bloody hated it. I mean, I suppose when I first arrived there, you're kind of in awe of the place, but I never felt I belonged there. Partly because of that imposter syndrome thing that you mentioned, and I referred to in the book, but also because I could just see the place just wasn't fit for purpose. I mean, if the chamber's not even big enough for a start, all the members,
Yeah, everybody has to stand at the side, don't they, if they want to get in there?
It's an absurdity. It's a palace. And when I came back in 2017, I started doing a regular video about the week in Westminster. And one of the videos, which was the most popular actually, was the one I did about the plans to refurbish the Houses of Parliament. And the cost at that time, it's probably ballooned since then. I mean, I thought I misread it when I looked at the figure, because they were talking about a cost of £3.5 billion. That's 3,500 million pounds. It's kind of an astonishing figure. And I was thinking, that can't be right. £3.5 billion quid, bloody hell, that can't be right. And it was. And, as I say, that was just one of the options, actually. There was another option, and there's various sorts of propositions about completely decanting or doing the work whilst the Parliament continued to function, and different options were cost more money, just more and more expensive. So I did this video saying, well, this is just ridiculous. I mean, what could we do with that money? I'm not saying that we shouldn't save the building. I mean, some might argue we should bulldoze it because it's a symbol of imperialism, which it is. But I wasn't suggesting we should go that far. I was saying, well, let's just, if you like, mothball it, turn it into a museum of democracy, even though there ain't much democracy really in reality goes on in that place. But okay, let's play the game for a minute and say let's turn it into a museum of democracy. Let's build a parliament somewhere else that's fit for purpose. Let's move it out of London. Let's move it up. Let's have a situation where the political centre is in a different location to the kind of commercial centre, because it's incredibly unhealthy, I think, this kind of incestuous relationship between the commercial centre and the kind of political centre. And that manifests itself in all sorts of ways. I mean, one of the most obvious ones, I think, is the amount of money that goes in, for example, to the kind of local infrastructure in the kind of London and the kind of surrounding environs, and you compare how much, for example, is spent on infrastructure per head of population in London and the southeast with, where I live in the Midlands and where you live in the southwest and further north. I mean, there's no comparison. And that is partly, I think, because you have that on a healthy link. And just going back to the point I was making, Lizzie, the vast majority of them, come from that sort of, Oxbridge, and many from sort of public school. And so, yeah, I did feel a bit kind of inferior to that. And then, the few working class MPs that were there were just as, like lackeys, really, like the sort of gamekeeper lackeys, that go around beating the grouse for the masters on the grouse moors, kind of lick-spittles, really, who just steep themselves in all this kind of bullshit sort of paraphernalia. And that never really attracted me at all. I mean, just seemed completely ludicrous, really. Even the vocabulary that's used in the place creates the distance between people and the members of Parliament. It's supposed to be, the People's Parliament, but it's anything but that. It's actually the elite Parliament. Parliamentarians on both sides of the chamber act as mouthpieces for corporate capitalism, for the military-industrial complex, for imperialism.
Yeah.
And I guess, you know, I mean, Winston Churchill said, did he say something about, you know, we shape some words to this effect, anyway, we shape the buildings and then the buildings shape us. And I just think, you know, there's a lot to be said about that, you know, just the way in which that's, you know, the way Parliament is constructed, the architecture, the chamber. And they're going to spend incredibly when apparently the MPs have to decant for the refurbishment work. They're going to spend, I think it was like 20 or 30 million quid, and again, that figure may have gone up, to build a replica parliament, a replica chamber. I mean, you know, it's absolutely barking mad, you know, but, you know, they all kind of love it. Well, I say all, but the vast majority of them kind of love all that, you know, they just get away with it.
Well, was it Zara Sultana when she first went into the House of Commons? I think it was her, made a video of all the gifts that she was given.
Yes, I saw that. Yeah.
And you know, the thing is that, and Richard Bergen, when he first went in, he made lots of videos interviewing the likes of Dennis Skinner and other MPs, and he doesn't do any of that anymore. Zara Sultana has done a few, but she's going to be, is she going to be up for reselection?
I suspect she probably will be. I've heard nothing about it so far, but I mean, to be honest, the so-called left in the Parliamentary Labour Party are toothless tigers, really. They're doing nothing.
Yeah, I mean, or in there for their own agendas, aren't they? In there for their own salaries.
It seems that way. You know, cowards and traitors is how I describe the Parliamentary Labour Party. There's a line, as you know, in the red flag, where cowards flinch and traitors steer. I thought, well, that could have been written for the Parliamentary Labour Party. Not one of them was prepared to speak up for me, for Jackie Walker, for Mark Wadsworth, for Ken Livingston. Ken Livingston, for God's sake, Ken has probably done more than anybody in public office, in high public office, when he was a leader of the Greater London Council in the early 1980s, who weren't the sobriquet as a loony lefty, in large measure, for the stance he was taking against racism.
Yeah.
I mean, racism, you know, was still quite a thing, you know, casual racism. I remember confronting it myself on the building sites and nearly getting the head kicked in more than a few occasions. And so it's incredibly hurtful to then be accused of being some sort of bigot, some sort of racist anti-Semite. And of course, Ken was one of the first high-profile individuals to be targeted. Nobody spoke up for him. I mean, I did. I mean, I wasn't in Parliament when they first went for Ken, but I continued to speak up for him afterwards. That was it. When they went for Ken, I think it was 2016, I was in that hiatus between losing my seat in 2015 and coming back in 2017. But continued to use my platform when I you know, regained it to actually speak out. Because my view, Lizzie, is, and maybe I'm naive, I don't know, but I don't think I am. I mean, I think it's the right way to be, although I seem to be the only one. I'm not trying to sort of blow my own trumpet at all, but I seem to be the only one, the only MP that was prepared to not just talk the talk. Maybe people feel I can't talk the talk, but I was prepared to walk the walk. I was prepared to use my platform. I felt it was important to use your political platform to speak up for what's right and to certainly show solidarity to comrades who have been incredibly badly treated. And, you know, Ken Livingston was one of these figures that, you know, you may talk about looking up to people. I mean, he was like an icon of the Labour movement. I mean, he's in his 70s now. He should be seen as an elder statesman of the Labour movement, should be venerated and respected. And I think he is by lots of grassroots members. And the grassroots are incredibly supportive to me. But he's like treated as a pariah by the Labour establishment. That's
exactly like George Galloway before him.
You know, absolutely. I mean, it's, you know, and
he should be treated as an elder statesman simply for what he did do.
That, you know, the Ken or George or any, you know, but these people have contributed a lot, made a lot of sacrifices. You know, I mean, talking about George there, for example, I mean, he was like undercover in South Africa working for the ANC, you know, when he was at risk of being killed, you know, putting his life on the line for a principle.
Yeah.
Now, how many people that slag George off week in and week out have put their lives on the line for a principle? Are very, very few, I suspect, you know. And that's not to say or defend everything that George says. I mean, there's certain things I disagree with George on a range of different stuff. But George used his considerable platform to defend me when I was under attack. And it was a severe attack. And in fact, as I was researching for this book, Lizzie, I mean, I came across loads of stuff that I just didn't know had been written or said about me. You know, it was quite a cathartic experience writing the book, and quite revealing to me, even though, you know, I lived it. Some of the stuff that I discovered, some of the people that, you know, stabbed me in the back,
Yeah.
I mean, I just didn't know. I mean, one of those, you know, Lizzie, was the chief executive of the Board of Deputies, a woman called Gillian, as she liked to be called when she became an MP. I've known her for 40 years. I used to work with her as a welfare rights officer. She used to go on holiday with my late wife. They went to Cuba together. We used to campaign together. She knows me. And she joined in the smears. She wrote the day or the day after it must have been, I was briefly reinstated for 48 hours. Gilly wrote this despicable op-ed for, I think it was The Independent, making out I was this, you know, despicable figure. She knew it was a lie.
Yes.
I mean, she knows what she was writing were bare-faced lies. You know, she just did it. And that was just one of a number, you know, that I felt incredibly let down by. I mean, okay, you know, she's working for the Board of Deputies, a Zionist organisation. Maybe you shouldn't be too surprised. And perhaps I wouldn't have expected her to, you know, come out singing my praises. But you don't expect somebody that you know and have known from, you know, relatively young age to, you know, write barefaced lies
Betray
about
you, to betray you so
me.
utterly.
I mean, I tell you what,
Yeah.
if my late wife was alive, my God,
Yeah.
she would have a few choice words for Gilly Merrin. Of Gilly, let's call her Gilly. That's what we always knew her as.
Yes.
Gillian nonsense that when she became an MP. I mean, that should have told me a story, actually, when she suddenly decided that, oh no, you must call me Gillian now. I'm a member of Parliament. God almighty, you know.
Yes.
What animal, you know? I mean, that typifies a lot of the kind of mentality of these characters, you know.
Well, this is it. What does go on in their heads? I mean, yes, we can take a step back and look at it and realize that actually none of this was about you personally. It was about getting rid of you because you were speaking out, what you were speaking out about, and the fact that you supported the people rising up. That was the problem. Like Jeremy once said,
they wanted to crush this movement. They wanted to crush the Corbyn project. Yeah. They saw me as an important figure in that movement. Jeremy's, if you like, key lieutenant, his loudest advocate, incredibly loyal to him. And it was a Democracy Roadshow, I think, which really wound them up, because I was going around the country. Yeah. We were getting huge audiences talking about democracy, and they were just, you know, they were just going apoplectic. All my lights gone off. They were just going apoplectic about all that. And well,
and that's why
I was told by somebody. Hang on a minute, Lizzie, my bloody lights are playing up here.
You're flashing.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm just going to get my thing on. I was told by one MP that he overheard a group of these saboteurs speaking in the tea room about me, about my case, and saying we've got to get Williamson expelled as payback for the Democracy Roadshow. And they go into, again, some detail about that in the book. So they were spitting feathers. And I was told as well by another MP, actually, funnily enough, actually, an MP who'd wanted to organise a crowdfunder to have me assassinated in a painful way, apparently, she said. But anyway, that's by the by. I'm sure it was just a joke. But she said, because that was then leaked to me, and she was very embarrassed. So can we meet up? And she was very profusely apologetic about it. And again, I'd speak about the detail of that without giving too much away in the book. But one of the things that she said was that I was giving the Parliamentary Labour Party a collective nervous breakdown because I was touring the country. And I said, look, there's no reason why. Look, I'm only going to places where the members have invited me. I guess that was what was kind of winding them up.
That was the problem.
They were themselves invited to attend. And in some cases, admittedly, it was the left-wing MPs, they came along. I mean, listen, we didn't talk that much about deselection yet. In fact, I never did talk about deselection. I talked about open selections. I said there are plenty of people that I would love to see deselected, but it ain't up to me, and nor should it be up to me, or Jeremy Corbyn. It should be your decision. And
Yeah.
that's all we're saying. But the vast majority of the discussion was about how we could democratise the Labour Party, how we could make the regional officers more fit, well, not more fit, but make them fit for purpose in the first place, because they're certainly not fit for purpose now. But all of that could be seen as just naval contemplation. But the point I was making is, and again, it's something that Tony Benn said, was to the effect of that we need to democratise our party in order to democratise society. And that was the point that I was making. Look, if we're going to democratise our economy, we've got to get the structures of the Labour Party right to make sure that, you know, we can continue to reach out and inspire people on the ground and continue to build and renew our movement, continue to hold the feet to the fire and keep their feet firmly planted on the ground of the MPs and councillors that get elected to represent us, you know, in town halls and in Parliament. But ultimately, it was about, as I say, ensuring that through the representative that we had in Parliament and hopefully, obviously, then into government, that we could ensure that the economy did actually work for people, that we did make industries democratically, like the utilities. We didn't, I mean, I was saying, look, we don't want to just kind of have a, you know, adopt the same model of nationalisation that we did in 1945, because we just changed one monolith, you know, a private monolith to a public sector monolith. And when the Tories came in and turbocharged the neoliberal agenda that Dennis Healey set in train, and when they started then privatising, you know, things like electricity, water, and all the rest of it, and people like myself, and I'm sure you, Lizzie, and many activists on the ground, if you were around in those days, I'm not sure whether I'm sort of, you're probably too young, actually, but anyway, but we were kind of making the case, look, you know, this, but you already own it. People didn't feel they owned it. They felt remote from the electricity board, the water board, the gas board. And so the point I was making is that, look, we need a new model of public ownership, one that is democratically accountable, so that people do genuinely feel a stake in it. And, you know, we were talking about some of the stuff that John McDonnell, and I was saying we should go further in relation to, you know, the right to own, to, you know, to create a network of worker co-ops. And one of the things that John was arguing and put in the manifesto, that any company that was going to be sold should give the first right of refusal to buy out that company to its workforce, so that which then they would then be able to create a worker cooperative, and they get finance for that from the national or the regional investment bank that John was talking about creating, and the support needed to actually, you know, create a company, to create a cooperative in that sense. But I was saying, well, we should go further than that. We should say any time that a company is going to offshore jobs, never mind about selling the company. I mean, like the city I was born in, it was a town when I was born in it, became a city in 1977, Derby, but there was 120,000 people working in manufacturing in Derby. Now it's, I don't know, about 25 or 30,000. It's still quite a lot, but, you know, nothing like it was. Now, new technologies take us some of them, but not the vast majority of them have been offshore. This is globalization. This is neoliberalism. And so what I was arguing, you know, as part of the Democracy Review and in these Democracy Roadshow meetings is, you know, putting forward those sorts of ideas that, you know, if we're going to make the economy work for us, if we're going to democratize the economy, if we're going to bring about the irreversible shift in the balance of wealth and power that we talked about and incorporated into our 1974 Labour manifesto, which Healey and bloody Callaghan then abandoned and led the, you know, opened the door for Thatcherism and neoliberalism and the rest of it. But if we were going to bring about that irreversible shift in the balance of wealth and power, then we needed this mobilized, this politicized movement. And, you know, the key thing for me, and one of the reasons why we've, you know, created Resist, and we're still only a very small acorn, I keep saying that, but we are, was really about trying to start to, you know, build that political consciousness, you know, to give people that confidence, if you like, that you know, that they do have power, but we can only exercise power. The working class can only exercise power if we demonstrate solidarity with each other. And that's why the establishment do their devil level best to make sure that we remain atomized. That's why, of course, they've undone the trade union movement while they took on and engineered that strike against the miners, because they were the brigade of guards of the labour movement. They had to smash organised labour in this country, and that's why we've got endemic precarious employment. That's why we've got over 14 million people living in poverty. That's why we've got 1.5 million people destitute in this country. That's why we've got people dying on the street because they're, sleeping rough in the 5th biggest economy in the world. And all these are the kind of themes that we were talking about in those Democracy Roadshow meetings. And that's why I think people felt so energized. It had nothing to do with me. It was the kind of topic that we were talking about. People felt really energized after those meetings. They felt ready to, man the barriers, as it were, because one of the things I was also saying is that if we can get into government, if we can make our MPs accountable, that's just in a way, that's the easy part. We didn't even manage the easy part, Lizzie, because the establishment will not lie down. They will do their level best to smash us, to undermine us, to destroy us. And I'm sure you'll recall a serving general, shortly after Jeremy got elected in 2015, said that they would use, and his exact words were, fair means or foul, it was a much longer quote, against a Corbyn-led government if they had the temerity to cut defence spending, withdraw from NATO, or scrap Trident. Now that's treason, mate.
Yeah.
That's treason, what he was speaking there. And he was like, reported in the Times and the rest of it. The mainstream is if it was normal.
Yeah.
Not saying we're going to use fair means or foul. He's talking about a coup.
Yeah.
Now, I was making the point, and I don't think I was indulging in hyperbole, as well as all this other stuff about political consciousness raising and all that. I was saying we're going to need a mass movement on the streets to defend a Labour government if it starts to embark upon the sort of radical reforms that, we want to bring about. And, I always used to say, Lizzie, what is it with these elites? What is it with these rich people? Because even with the reforms that we were talking about introducing, they would still be rich.
Yes, they would still be rich.
We're not sort of going to send them to bloody Anthrax Island on the Outer Hebrides or something. Do you know what I mean? It's like they would still have loads of money. They've got so much money, they cannot spend it. Literally can't spend the money that they've got, even if they tried, to sort of spend it on whatever, I mean, as somebody said, just to sort of give a flavour of, how much £1 billion is, and there's loads of billionaires in this country and many, many multi-millionaires. And I can't remember what the stat is, but it's something like if you, to count to 1 million, it's about 11 days or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. And it's 130 years.
Yes, that's right. Which gives you an indication of the scale of it,
Yeah.
How much money do these people want? I mean, it's, I don't know, mate. But of course, with that comes incredible power. And they use that power, they wielded that power against us. But unfortunately, I still feel that we might have prevailed. It would have been difficult. But unfortunately, the people around Jeremy, and again, it's what I cover in the book, the people around Jeremy himself, they didn't fight. They didn't
For
fight
me,
hard. They tried to appease the unappeasable. They tried to appease the Zionist lobby. They weren't interested in being appeased.
no.
They fancy sending Jeremy to go and prostrate himself before the border deputies, this Zionist conservative outfit, and this self-appointed Jewish Leadership Council. I could have written the press statement that they were going to write before it even happened. Yeah. Inevitably, they said it was a waste of time, Corby's not listening, and all the rest of it. And as for the Jewish Leadership Council, something else I cover in the book, and the whole anti-Semitism, nonsense.
Debacle.
It was a debacle. I mean, one of the examples that I cite in the book is when, and it was a few weeks before, well, no, the month before I was suspended. Every year leading up to Holocaust Memorial Day, the Holocaust Education Trust has what they call a book of commitment in the House of Commons in a kind of cloistered area. MPs sign it, and I've signed it every year when I was there in 2015 and so on. And I'd signed it in 2017 and signed it in 2018 as well. And they took a photograph of me and asked if I could put it out on social media, which I, dutifully did, and with a message. And I kind of basically repeated the message that I'd written in the book of commitment, talking about, the horror. I can't remember the precise wording, Lizzie, but words to the effect about the horrors of the Holocaust. We must do everything we can to prevent the horrors of the Holocaust ever returning, and it was words to the effect, through love and solidarity, we will prevail. Words to those effects. Anyway, I'll put it much more eloquently than I've just sort of recited it to you. But for doing that was then seen as Jew baiting, as baiting the Jewish community. It got Rachel Riley saying, Jew baiter Chris Williamson, hands off our grief, how dare you? And I got a letter, a formal letter, which was an open letter published on social media from the chair of the self-appointed Jewish Leadership Council, taking me to task. How dare you? You're a disgrace. Blah, 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 blah. It's unbelievable. We've reproduced the letter in the well, I think actually we've got some QR codes which people can scan and it will take them to the original document. But you know what I mean? That was the scale of it. It was just absurd. And it didn't matter what you did,
No.
nothing was good enough. And so what, Jeremy's big mistake was in trying to reason with these people. He should have just told them to sod off from day one. And, if he was a bit uncomfortable about, which I don't think he should have been, but if he felt a bit uncomfortable about speaking out on an issue like anti-Semitism in support of people like Mark Wadsworth or Ken Livingstone who weren't Jewish, then he had the perfect alibi, the perfect reason to speak out when they went for Jews.
Yeah.
Tony Greenstein, the son of a rabbi whose dad confronted Oswald Mosley's fascists in 1936 at the Battle of Cable Street. I mean, and Tony has an encyclopedic knowledge about the history of Zionism and so on and whatever else. And I mean, he's scathing about the border deputies. And he was saying back even in those days, the border deputies were saying to the Jewish community, oh, don't get involved in this confrontation with the fascists, stay indoors and all that kind of stuff. Well, obviously his dad was a rabbi, so there would not been any of that, and it was basically the Jewish community, the Irish community, the Labour movement coming together to confront Oswald Mosley's fascists. So there's a perfect example. Cyril Chilton, another grotesque example, really, of the depths to which the Zionist lobby, to which the right wing of the Labour Party will sink. Cyril was born in Israel. Cyril served in the Israeli military. Cyril saw the light, came to this country, became a strong advocate for Palestinian rights, a big supporter of Jeremy Corbyn. He was accused of anti-Semitism, expelled from the Labour Party for bringing it into disrepute on the grounds that he was anti-Semitic. Both his parents, Lizzie, survived Auschwitz. Both his parents. They were on the death march, Lizzie. I mean, it kind of makes my blood boil even now to think about it. It's so bloody despicable and unfair and wrong and unjust. And yet they got away with it. And Jeremy didn't speak out. The campaign group didn't speak out against these abuses. I was the only one, Lizzie.
And that's why you were taken out.
I am not anything special at all. But it just comes back to that point that if you have a political platform, I believe, maybe I'm old-fashioned, you are duty-bound to use that to speak up for what's right. And for Christ's sake, if it isn't right to speak up for somebody who was falsely accused of anti-Semitism, whose parents survived Auschwitz, whose dad was a rabbi, and then, of course, Jackie Walker, the despicable way in which,
already been thrown out of America.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, there's the irony, isn't it? Victims of McCarthyism. Again, I mentioned this in the book. I talked about it in some detail about Jackie. Victims of McCarthyism had to leave America, came to this country, had a very difficult life, Jackie, I mean, they were poor, victims of racism, and, racism in the 60s was pretty bloody appalling. A little girl, I mean, and she's an inspiration, She inspired me because, she didn't buckle. She maintained her dignity, Yeah. And I remember the first time I saw her, Lizzie, the first time I saw Jackie was outside the Labour Party conference hall she was outside, she couldn't go in because she was suspended at the time, despicably. And she was leafleting, and I spoke to Jackie, and again, I mentioned this in the book, I talk about that encounter, and I stopped and chatted to her, and she was quite surprised, actually, because she'd seen about me, she didn't think that I would want to be seen with her,
Yeah.
And I said, you couldn't be further from the truth, Jackie. How you've been treated is absolutely appalling. And, you know, I can't remember again, I can't remember the precise words. I think I've cited them in the book here. But I said, it's kind of privilege, you know, to meet you. You know, we posed for a photograph, and you know, we shared it around. And again, that was again caused me some grief, as it were. But Jackie was a real inspiration because, you know, she maintained her dignity. Yes, she got expelled, but she kind of, you know, she showed the way. And, you know, as I say, all that she'd experienced, all that her parents experienced, and for her then to become a victim of a Labour Party McCarthy style witch hunt. I mean, you know, oh dear me. This is so bloody wrong, you know, Lizzie. It's so unfair, it's so unjust, it's so despicable. But so many people have been treated so badly, and some people have experienced real mental ill health.
Oh, absolutely,
you know,
absolutely.
I mean, it's, you know, and the Labour Party is just, if it's ever been fit for purpose, it's totally unfit for purpose now. And I think our duty, I keep saying this, is to destroy the Labour Party, do our best to destroy the Labour Party. Like in America, we've got two corporate mainstream parties in this country. They both speak for corporate capitalism. They both speak for imperialism. They both speak for the military
war
industrial
machine
complex, you know, the war machine. Absolutely. And we've got no prospect. We know we've got no prospect now of turning it round. I mean, you know, maybe I was naive, but we've never been through the experience of the Corbyn era. Tony Benn never ever made it to become the leader or even deputy leader of the party. You know, but we have. I know some people still say, "Oh, you know, you got to stay, you got to fight," but how?
No, that's right. How many times do you...
Every avenue has been denied you. And, you know, we see, I mean, the political Socialist Campaign Group, as I keep saying, are pathetic. I mean, they even took their names off that mealy-mouthed Stop the War statement, which was a fairly mild, I believe, statement about the situation in Ukraine. You know, you've got Starmer's article of faith now to support NATO. He was even equating NATO. The fact that it was, I mean, this is one of the points about that 1945 Labour government. I mean, bear in mind, NATO was established before the so-called Warsaw Pact, you know. Yeah. Labour, that was, you know, one of the founders of all that. So, you know, I mean, that was again a big error of that 1945 Labour government. But you know, it's an article of faith now to be you know, support NATO, and Starmer's basically putting it on a par with the establishment of the National Health Service. That 1945 Labour government, yes, we set the National Health Service and we created NATO. You know, we were a partner to bloody creating NATO. You think, Jesus Christ Almighty, you know.
Yeah.
What's these people think? You know, I mean, it's just unbelievable, mate.
It's a narrative that they've been given or is ingrained or propagandized into them that they procreate. And looking from the outside, as independent media, with the cynicism of being in mainstream media before that, I saw that the strategy that was employed against the likes of Jackie Walker, Mark Wadsworth, who were influential amongst the people, the members of the Labour Party. And then you came to the forefront as Jeremy Corbyn had proposed ideals and ideas, and you took those forward to actions. You went on the road, you created the Democracy Roadshow, and you went out and you spoke to people, and you enabled those people to realize their own power. And that was why you had to be taken out. And the final nail in your coffin was your trip to the Institute of Statecraft, asking about the integrity.
That certainly didn't. That didn't enamor me to the elites. Let's put it like that.
That was when they got serious about taking you out. That was when they got serious about taking you out.
I mean, you know, I think a lot of people have said that, Lizzie. Whether it was or not, I don't know. But there's certainly a coincidence there. It's interesting because Alan Duncan, you know,
it was bleedingly obvious to me, and to all of independent media.
Yes, well, again, you know, I'm naive, mate, you know, but and again, I felt it was important though that we confronted them, because again, using your political platform, you know, to do what's right, to speak up for what's right. I mean, and Alan Duncan in his diaries, you know,
It's the way that
And
guy slammed the door on you, though.
yeah,
He didn't
absolutely.
even
Yeah,
wait to hear who you were,
no,
because he knew
absolutely.
damn well who you were.
No, absolutely. But I mean, you know, they've been bankrolled by the government. I mean, just that one project that they set up, the Integrity Initiative, that had over £2 million from the former Commonwealth Office and about, I think it was about £500,000 from the Ministry of Defence. And it was almost like a replica of the Operation Mockingbird that was set up in the United States in the early 1950s at the height of the Cold War, that was eventually kind of like outed by the Church Committee that was set up over there in relation to the Watergate scandal. But yeah, a few people have, I mean, obviously you were kind of like ahead of the curve really there, you know, in that sense, saying that, you know, that had something to do with, you know, being...
Oh, it was absolutely the reason why they had to get serious with the attacks on you, because...
Alan Duncan mentions it in his diary, you know, he talks about that horrible Chris Williamson or something. He's the most hated man in Parliament by both sides of the chamber. And he was going on about the Integrity Initiative, and he says, this horrible guy, you know, he keeps raking it up and, you know, causing me great difficulties and blah, blah, blah. You know, again, we've quoted his extracts in there. It's quite funny. Actually, quite a compliment, really, because he talks about me in the same breath as you're talking about the likes of Che Guevara and Fidel Castro.
Well, exactly, because you dared.
I mean, I was like, bloody hell. I mean, talk about being in the company of greats, as it were, to be spoken of in the same set. I mean, I'm nowhere.
But that's exactly what you were doing. You know? No, that's your imposter syndrome kicking in again.
That he in his diaries mentioned explicitly that about the Integrity Initiative, you know, and that I was, you know, causing them acute embarrassment, etc. Yeah, he called me. He was referring to a comment from Nicholas Soames, who referred to some of our front bench as Poundland Lenins or something. And I asked a question about Venezuela and quoted Alfred de Zayas, who said that the sanctions against Venezuela were tantamount to crimes against humanity, and basically challenging the government's position in relation to Venezuela. And his response was great. You know, he said, I heard from my honourable friend referring to the blah, 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 you know, as Poundland Lenin says, well, we've just heard from somebody who's not even worth a penny, let alone a pound. I mean, I'm surprised he even had the temerity to turn up in the chamber today, you know. So he never answered the question.
No, of course not. Well, that's not the point, is it?
In an insult, you know. Yeah.
The whole point
Interestingly, Lizzie, when I was asking that question about Venezuela and making the points about Alfred de Zayas, I was being jeered as loudly, if not more loudly, by the Labour bench. But I was a Labour MP still at that time. I was being jeered as loudly, if not more loudly, by the Labour benches as I was by the Tory benches. And Duncan was being cheered as loudly in his riposte by the Labour benches as the Tories. It's unbelievable, mate.
Yeah.
Well, it's not unbelievable, but you know,
it's staggering. It's staggering, isn't it? It's staggering that this is all normalised. That this corruption, this war machine, being in control of our government, the interests of foreign countries being in control of this country, and of every single thing that any person in this country does is under the permission of foreign countries.
Yeah, I mean, it's this, you know, I mean, it's a scandal, really. But I mean, you know, it's not entirely a book of despair, and it's just all, you know, gloom and doom.
Well, we're all still here, aren't we? We're all
still here, and
we're all still outside the Labour Party now.
Yeah, absolutely, I made that point, and you know, the point. I mean, I conclude by saying, look, you know, like we are still all here.
Yeah,
and that
we're still working as hard as ever in our own ways.
And we've got to collaborate. We've got to find a way of collaborating. You know, I finish off with hasta la victoria siempre. You know, onwards until victory always. And you know, stars in the wind. I mean, you know, we are. I mean, I'm speaking to various people, prominent people on the left. You know, about trying to bring socialists together. Difficult. And of course, the state will work its damnedest to try and stop that. Divide and rule. I mean, the British Empire success was built upon divide and rule.
Yeah.
And that mentality, that mindset is still alive and kicking inside the elites today. And, you know, the left has never really been able to come together. That the greatest tool that they've got to undo us is this kind of division amongst ourselves. And don't forget that. And we know that from things like, what they did during the miners' strike, the spy cop revelations,
Yeah, and if you look at your
to which they will not stoop to do it
if you look at your CLP, you will find that there are at least 3 people in strategic positions within that CLP that are right wing, that are doing the bidding of unknown masters. And if that's happening in your CLP, because how many lefties have been thrown out because someone in their CLP has reported them as being anti-Semitic, has trolled through their social media to find something that they've said which doesn't fit the narrative. And they've absolutely. If they're doing it in the CLP, they're doing it everywhere.
Well, and the Paul Mason revelations, he's an asset of the intelligence services. I mean, Paul Mason, again, I've shared platforms with him, and I was like, again, thinking, bloody hell, I'm sharing a platform with Paul Mason. I'm not willing to share a platform with Paul Mason. Turns out he's a bloody spook,
He's not worthy. He's not worthy of you, Chris. And in 2015, I was at a march to try and protest about the state of the NHS and our doctors and nurses. And Paul Mason appeared at the first protest, and that was when he started doing this. Yeah. So that's 7 years he's been doing this secretly.
Well, actually, I think it goes back a lot further than that.
Right back to the
1980s, right back, and his role in action or some kind of far left group. And no, I think it's a lot longer career than just the last 7 years. I mean, probably it's a more senior level, certainly getting into. And the other interesting thing, somebody made this point to me, Lizzie. They were always suspicious, a bit like what you were just saying about, the intention of me being bloody naive and everything, but you were kind of ahead of the curve there. But I can't remember what was telling me now, but they'd said they were always suspicious of Paul Mason because they made the point, how has a lefty got into a senior position like him at the heart of the BBC, particularly when we know that, MI5 and MI6, they
BBC do not employ people who openly admit they're lefties.
So they were always suspicious. And so it was no surprise when the revelations that Kit Clarenberg, wrote, Kit Clarenberg and Max Blumenthal, they were not. I don't know if you saw that spidery graph that he did of all the kind of dangers to,
I did. You weren't on it. I wasn't on it.
I was on it.
Oh, were you on it?
I was on it.
Oh,
I was on it, yeah.
You're part of the privilege then. I don't know if I want to speak to you now.
Yes, I was on it. I was on his spidery diagram, but anyway, yeah. So.
Were you a later edition?
No. Apparently, I was on his thing. I mean, it's
Well, when you look at it, you can see where it started. With Diane Abbott when she was health secretary for 2 months. And that was at that time in 2015. Yeah. And I think that's when he drew that diagram first of all, and then he's just added to it.
Because I don't think I was seen as any sort of particular. I think it was mainly when although I did.
Are you on the Israel map?
We drew up a statement that we then got 15 other or 13 other MPs to sign, should I say? People like Jeremy signed it, John McDonnell signed it, Diane Abbott, Dennis Skinner, etc. And this was in desperation, really, because of the austerity light agenda that Miliband was pursuing. And we had a little meeting, and there's 5 of us. And again, I mentioned this in the book. And we came forward with this proposal. And we didn't want to write an alternative manifesto. We were trying to be helpful. But there were 3 things that we argued for. We said that Labour should commit to an anti-austerity agenda, that we should commit to properly renationalising the roads, not the bloody silly halfway house that Miliband came up with, and repealing the anti-trade union legislation. There was massive support for that, and that was published in the January of 2015. And then, of course, the election came and we all saw what happened. But yeah, so maybe you saw me as some sort of a threat even in 2015. But anyway, yeah.
No,
I think we are, aren't we now?
You have absolutely been a threat. And as Jeremy Corbyn said, it's not me they fear, it's you.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And even Jeremy betrayed you. Jeremy betrayed you. He's never answered the questions that I've put to him about why.
Jeremy was under enormous pressure.
Of course
No
he
doubt
was.
about that.
Of course he was. But after
He had
he's
the wrong
left,
people around him.
after he got attacked himself,
Yeah.
he's had 2 years or 3 years almost to stand up and speak out the truth about that situation, and still he hasn't. Still he's clinging on to the Labour Party. Now why?
Maybe it will at some point, but yeah, it is disappointing. But I mean, I say, don't underestimate the pressure that you know, is put on individuals. I mean, and you've got to be particularly steely. And Jeremy had never had a leadership position before he became leader of the Labour Party. And now, whether or not that meant he was more ill-prepared, but look, if it was somebody like George Galloway, he would have never made those concessions. Or Ken Livingstone, I wouldn't have done. You know, and I certainly wouldn't have abandoned my comrades. I would have spoken out against this bullshit.
Yeah.
And you can't be all things to all people. I always say, you know, politics should be about giving people a choice. Yeah. Stand up for your beliefs. Okay, you will alienate some people. You will piss some people off. But you'll also inspire other people. And politics, democracy, should be about giving people a choice.
Yeah, it should be about
people. Because as Nye Evans said, the problem with that is when you stand in the middle of the road, you tend to get run over.
Well, we've got less than 30 seconds left. So all that's left for me to say is thank you so much, Chris Guevara, for coming on the show tonight and talking about the way that you have stood up for the people of this country and spoken out about the truth of the matter, which is that there is no way there is a political solution for this at the moment. It needs to be grassroots. It needs the people to rise up.
I think so. Grassroots action and, you know, political representation, you know, elections are, yes, an important component, but if you rely just on electing good people, you're always going to be sorely disappointed. You need a grassroots movement. You need strength in depth to ensure
we can't elect anybody. We can't elect anybody because they're being thrown out of elections, aren't they? Selections.
Well, that's true. But I mean, you know, direct action, you know, can bear fruit. There's no doubt about that. In fact, all the progress that we've made in this country has been actually, in the end, delivered through pressure from below. And look at what Palestine Action are achieving now. They've forced Albert, the Israeli arms company, out of its London headquarters. They've forced them to close down their factory in Oldham. They're continuing their struggle, their campaign all over the country, every location. You know, they're relentless and making sacrifices, being imprisoned, and all the rest of it. Yeah. But you know, they're an inspiration, and you know, it just shows that direct action can make a difference. So you know, don't despair. I think, and let's keep hope alive.
Yeah.
And, you know, in the end, if we do that,
and we join in on the picket lines.
Solidarity, exactly. Then
join
we will
in on
prevail.
the picket lines. Join in Extinction Rebellion on the 10th of September.
Indeed,
go to
absolutely.
all the picket lines.
Extinction Rebellion, another good example of direct action, etc.
Yeah.
And insulate Britain as
union.
well. Yeah, and join a union, absolutely. All those things.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. Sorry, Gaz, we've gone over a bit, and sorry to the audience. We have no one on Q&A tonight, so we couldn't answer your questions. But thank you so very much for being with us and talking to Chris. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Solidarity, comrade. Cheers.